Linda's fingers dug into my forearm so hard I felt her wedding ring bite through my sleeve. The kitchen smelled like champagne and fresh paint. Somewhere behind me, a string quartet was playing something light and pointless. I was holding a glass of sparkling water I hadn't touched, watching steam curl off a tray of hors d'oeuvres, when Linda leaned in close enough that her breath moved the hair by my ear. "We have to go? Right now?" I turned to look at her face, and it had gone the color of the tablecloth. "Linda, what? Not here." Her grip tightened. "Gary, not here." Behind her, through the doorway, I could hear our son's wife laughing at something. A bright, easy laugh. The kind of laugh you give when you think no one important is listening. I didn't know yet what Linda had heard. I only knew that in 36 years of marriage, she had never once looked at me like that. "My name is Gary Whitmore. I'm 61 years old, and for 34 years I built houses. Not metaphorically, actually built them, with my hands, and later with a crew of 42 men and women who trusted me to make payroll every other Friday, rain or shine, recession or boom. I started Whitmore Construction and Design in 1992 out of the back of a Ford pickup with $1,100 and a set of borrowed tools. 2 years ago, I sold that company for $3,200,000. That money wasn't supposed to buy anyone's silence or anyone's obedience. It was supposed to be the last gift I gave my family before I stepped back and let them build their own lives, the way I'd built mine, one foundation at a time. $600,000 of it went to my son, Kyle, and his wife, Ashley, as a down payment on the house where that party was happening. The rest, $2.6 million, sat in a family trust that Kyle, who has a finance degree and a job at a wealth management firm, had offered to manage so Dad doesn't have to deal with the tax headache. I trusted him. He was my son. I taught him to drive, to shoot free throws, to shake a man's hand like he meant it. I had no idea, standing in that kitchen with my wife's hand shaking on my arm, that I was about to learn exactly what my son thought I was worth. Linda pulled me out through the sliding door onto the back patio, away from the noise, and told me what she'd heard. She'd gone looking for a bathroom and found herself outside the study instead, where the door was open a few inches. Ashley was in there with her 2 friends from the gym, the ones in matching white dresses and the identical blown-out hair, each of them holding a glass of the champagne we'd paid for. She said, Linda whispered, and I quote, "Once we get the assessment done on my father-in-law, the whole trust rolls under Kyle's name. No more asking permission. No more waiting for the old man to die naturally." I felt something cold slide down through my chest. Then she laughed, Linda said. She laughed, Gary. And one of her friends said, "Won't the mom fight it?" And Ashley said, Linda's voice cracked. She said, "Linda's sweet. Linda's harmless. She does what Gary tells her." And then she said the 2 of us were, and I'm quoting her exactly, a couple of easy test subjects. I looked back through the glass door at the party, at the chandelier we'd helped pay for, at my son, laughing with his hand on another man's shoulder, utterly at ease. Test subjects. I didn't say anything to Linda. I just nodded once, put my water glass down on the patio railing, and told her we'd stay another hour. Smile. Eat the cake. Say goodnight like nothing happened. Because if my son and his wife wanted to test me, I was going to make sure I passed on my terms, not theirs. 2 days after the party, I called the trust's bank under the pretense of updating my mailing address. The representative, a young man who clearly hadn't been briefed to watch what he said to the actual grantor of the trust, mentioned that a $210,000 disbursement had gone out the month before to something called Kestrel Bridge Holdings LLC. I'd never heard of Kestrel Bridge Holdings. I called Kyle that evening, keeping my voice easy, curious, the way a father asks about something he doesn't quite understand. "Oh, that," Kyle said, and I could hear him exhale like the question bored him. "That's a bridge financing vehicle, Dad. We're using it to hedge the trust's equity exposure ahead of a rate correction. It's a completely standard liquidity maneuver. You wouldn't have run into it in construction, but in wealth management, it's bread and butter." I said that made sense. I thanked him for explaining it so patiently. Then I hung up and drove to the county clerk's office the next morning. Kestrel Bridge Holdings LLC had been registered 4 months earlier. Its listed manager was Ashley Whitmore. Its registered address was our son's new house. I sat in my truck in the parking lot of the county building for 20 minutes before I could make myself turn the key. The following Sunday, Linda and I stopped by unannounced to drop off a casserole. We'd always been the drop-by unannounced kind of family, and I wanted to see if that was still true. Kyle's car was in the driveway. We let ourselves in through the garage, the way we always had. We heard them before they saw us. He didn't even blink. Ashley was saying, somewhere near the kitchen, bridge financing. God, he ate it up. His generation thinks anything with the word liquidity in it is too complicated to question. He built houses, Ash, not spreadsheets, Kyle said, and I heard the particular laugh he'd had since he was 9 years old, the one where he tipped his head back. He signed over trustee authority to me because he trusts me. That's the whole play. Trust is a vulnerability if you know how to use it. I stood very still in the garage doorway with a casserole dish getting heavy in my hands, and Linda's fingers found mine and squeezed once hard. We left the casserole on the counter without a word and drove home in silence. 3 weeks later, I got a call from a Dr. Marsh's office confirming a cognitive baseline evaluation scheduled in my name for the following month. I hadn't scheduled anything. I looked up Dr. Marsh. He'd testified as an expert witness in 4 guardianship proceedings over the last 6 years, 3 of which resulted in adult children gaining full legal control of a parent's assets. His fee for a consultation was $11,000, paid in advance. I found the payment in the trust's disbursement history 2 days later. $11,000, paid out under the description medical advisory retainer. I confronted Kyle one more time, over coffee, keeping my hands wrapped around the mug so he wouldn't see them tremble. Just a routine check-in with an estate planning physician, he told me, not even looking up from his phone. Everyone our age does it for their parents now, Dad. It protects you. It protects the family. It's just good governance. Good governance. My son used the phrase good governance to describe scheduling a competency exam behind my back with a doctor who specialized in taking money away from people like me. I told him that sounded very responsible of him. Then I went home and started building a file. I made a decision that night, sitting across from Linda at our kitchen table with the lights off except for the one over the stove. If Kyle and Ashley believed I was slipping, confused, forgetful, easy, then the fastest way to stop them wasn't to prove I was sharp. It was to prove I was exactly as weak as they already believed. Let them relax. Let them get sloppy. A man defending himself makes people careful. A man who looks like he's already lost makes people careless. So I started performing. I began asking Kyle the same question twice in a single phone call, a beat too slow the second time, like the first answer hadn't quite landed. I let my hand shake slightly when I signed for packages. Nothing dramatic, just a small, believable tremor I practiced in the bathroom mirror until it looked natural. I started carrying a cane I didn't need, leaning on it a little more each week whenever Kyle or Ashley was in the room, and not at all when they weren't. At Sunday dinner, I called Ashley Amanda and apologized, flustered, dabbing at my mouth with my napkin. I watched her eyes flick to Kyle across the table. I watched the small, satisfied twitch at the corner of Kyle's mouth. Inside, I was steadier than I'd been in years. Every slow blink, every what was I saying, was a brick laid exactly where I wanted it. My father used to tell me that in construction, you never argue with a man who thinks the foundation is already cracked. You just let him keep building on it until the whole thing comes down on its own schedule, not yours. Linda played her part too. She started deferring to me in front of them, saying, "You'll have to ask Gary, he handles all that now," about things she'd always managed herself. It cost her something. I could see it. But she never wavered. I hired a private investigator, a retired detective named Ruth Alvarez who'd done insurance fraud work for 30 years, and together we built the bait. The bait was simple, a fake letter, printed on real stationery from an estate attorney I didn't know and trust, stating that I intended to move an additional $400,000 out of the trust into a new account for liquidity in my declining years, language deliberately chosen to sound like something a frightened, failing old man's lawyer would write. I had the letter delivered to the house by courier, addressed to me, but arranged for it to be accidentally left on the kitchen counter during a Sunday visit where I knew Ashley would be alone in the house for 20 minutes while Kyle ran to the store. Ruth had already helped me install a small recording device in the head of my cane. The same cane I'd been leaning on for 6 weeks by then. So unremarkable to them, it had practically become furniture. That Sunday, I sat in the living room with the letter misplaced on the counter, my phone silent in my lap, buzzing once against my thigh every time Ruth, parked 2 streets over with a receiver, confirmed the feed was live. I watched Ashley walk past that letter twice, pretending not to look, and then stop the third time and pick it up. I heard her on the phone in the kitchen not 4 minutes later, her voice pitched low and fast. "He's moving $400K, Kyle. Now, we have to accelerate the evaluation. I don't care what Marsh's calendar looks like. We pay him whatever he wants. If your father moves that money before the petition is filed, we lose it. I am not losing that money because you wanted to wait until Christmas to be respectful." My phone buzzed against my leg, once, twice, 3 times. Ruth, 3 streets over, recording every word through the cane, sitting 3 feet from Ashley's elbow. I sat perfectly still, my hands folded, my face arranged into the mild, distant expression I'd been practicing for 6 weeks. Thanksgiving that year was at our house, the house I'd built with my own hands in 1994, and I made sure everyone was there. Kyle, Ashley, Linda's sister, and her husband, Kyle's old business partner, and, at my quiet request, the 2 lawyers I'd hired. Kyle stood up before dessert, tapping his glass with a fork, and announced, to the whole table, to my sister-in-law, to everyone, that he and Ashley had some difficult news to share out of love. He said the word guardianship. He said, for Dad's own protection. He said it with his chin up, like a man accepting an award. Ashley reached over and patted my hand on the table, right in front of everyone. "We just want what's best for you, Gary," she said, and smiled the same bright, easy smile I'd watched her give her gym friends through a cracked study door. I let the silence sit for exactly 3 seconds. Then I reached down, picked up my cane from where it leaned against my chair, and set it flat on the table between the mashed potatoes and the gravy boat. "Before you go any further," I said, "I think everyone should hear this." I pressed play. Ashley's voice filled the dining room, tinny, but unmistakably hers. "We have to accelerate the evaluation. I am not losing that money." I watched the color drain out of her face in real time. I didn't raise my voice. I never do. I just laid the facts down one at a time, like courses of brick. Kestrel Bridge Holdings was registered 4 months ago, Kyle, with Ashley as manager and your address on file. $210,000 of my trust went into it. Dr. Marsh has been paid $11,000 for a competency evaluation you scheduled without telling me, using a doctor with a track record of testifying children into control of their parents' money. And 40 minutes ago, my attorney, I nodded toward the man sitting quietly by the window, filed a report with the county with all of it attached, including tonight's recording. Kyle's mouth opened and nothing came out. "I built houses for 34 years, I said. "I know exactly what a bad foundation sounds like when it starts to go. It sounds like this." There was a knock at the front door precisely on schedule. 2 officers from the county fraud division, there to serve papers Ruth and my attorneys had arranged for that exact hour, stepped into the front hall. I picked up the fake attorney's letter, the bait, the one Ashley had photographed and forwarded to Kyle, the one that had triggered everything, and I tore it once, cleanly, down the middle, and set the halves on the table next to the cane. "That letter was never real," I said quietly. "But everything you did because of it was." In the 6 weeks that followed, the County Fraud Division's investigation moved fast, helped along by Ruth's paper trail and the recording. Kyle was removed as trustee within 8 days, by court order, and permanently barred from any fiduciary role over the remaining trust assets. He was charged with breach of fiduciary duty and attempted fraud. Facing the recording and the shell company paperwork, he took a plea that cost him his finance license and 2 years of probation. Ashley was charged separately for her role in Kestrel Bridge Holdings. The wealth management firm where Kyle worked terminated him within the week, citing conduct incompatible with fiduciary responsibility in a 2-line press statement. Dr. Marsh's medical board opened its own inquiry into his evaluation practices, the 5th such complaint in 6 years. Kyle and Ashley's marriage did not survive the winter. Neighbors reported moving trucks at the house, our $600,000 worth of down payment, by early February. But I didn't let the fallout touch the people who didn't deserve it. Kyle's old business partner, who'd been dragged into the investigation simply for having once shared an office with him, I personally vouched for in a signed statement and helped connect to a new position through a contact of mine in the industry. And I set up a small, separate trust, completely outside Kyle's reach now, for my 2 grandchildren, so that whatever came next for their parents, their college funds would never be touched by any of it. Linda cried when I told her about the grandchildren's trust. Not about anything else. Just that. It was raining the night Kyle showed up at our door in March, 5 months later. He'd lost the house, the job, most of his friends, and, from the look of him, thin and unshaven in a jacket too light for the weather. Quite a bit of his certainty, too. He stood on the porch with water running off his collar and asked if he could stay, just for a few weeks, just until he got back on his feet. "Dad," he said, and his voice cracked in a way I hadn't heard since he was a boy. "I know I don't deserve it, but you're my father." I stood in the doorway with the warm light of the house behind me, Linda's hand resting quietly on my shoulder. "I was your father the whole time, Kyle," I said. "Even the night you called me and Linda test subjects. That never stopped being true. But being your father doesn't mean I hand you the keys to a house you already tried to take from me once." I told him there were shelters 2 miles east that took walk-ins, and that I loved him, and that neither of those things was going to change what I said next. Then I closed the door, gently, the way you close a door on a room you don't intend to go back into that night. Linda and I stood in the front hall for a while, listening to the rain against the windows. "Foundations before walls," I said finally, the thing I used to tell every crew I ever ran. The thing I'd said to Kyle 100 times over the years without knowing he'd never once actually understood it. You don't get to skip that step just because you're in a hurry. Linda leaned her head against my shoulder. "We built ours right," she said. 36 years worth, I said. It held. Here's what I learned. Sitting in that dining room with a torn letter and a recording that changed everything. Love doesn't mean access, and trust is something you earn every single day, not something you inherit just because of the last name on your birth certificate. The people who talk the loudest about protecting you are sometimes the ones you need the most protection from. If someone in your life has ever made you feel like you had to prove you still deserve control over your own life, I want to hear about it. Have you ever had to play weak to expose someone who thought you were? Drop your story in the comments below. And if this one hit home, hit like, subscribe for more, and share it with someone who needs to hear it tonight.